I was sitting out there in the shed one evening, not doing too much of nothing, just kind of staring at the wall. And
hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the Mr. Fix-It channel. I'm going to get this starter pulled out and I'm going to get that thing rebuilt. Stay tuned. So the starter on this machine is way down at the bottom of the motor here. I've got the clutch and everything, all the cover, all that pulled off on this side to expose the starter. Now you can like take the skid plate off and try to reach up in here and get this off, but there's not enough room to really do it. You got these two bolts you got to take out to get this bracket off. You got to undo the starter wire. And on this side you got to take this chain cover off, take your chain loose, and you got to get this pull start cover off, because there's two bolts that run into the starter this way. Now I'm going to save you from watching me do all that disassembly. If you don't know how to get the starter out, check out one of my videos. There'll be a link here for the engine rebuild I did on this, and I'll show you how the starter is bolted in and all that. But to get that out of there, take this side off, take the other side off, and then the starter will come out this way. So if you own one of these quads and you submerge this thing in water, or if you wash it a lot, you're going to be replacing your starter. And the reason is because it's either going to leak past this grommet, or it's going to leak past your pull cord seal, and all that water is going to run right down in, and it's going to run right into the starter, and the starter is the lowest point. So thanks Polaris. And that being said, there is a drain screw right there. It's kind of hard to see, but right there is a 10mm head bolt, and there's a little hole right there that'll get the water out of here, but the starter is still the lowest point. So at least they thought about this. And on your starter, if you see on the bottom there's a bolt hole. The bolt goes in there, and that is the drain for the actual starter, because this starter sits in here like this. So the motor is actually the lowest point. You can see that bolt's pointing down, so you can drain the starter also. But I mean, even though you can drain all this stuff, even just getting water in here is going to make the starter rot, because you're not going to get, I mean, look what happens to them. They just get destroyed from water infiltration. Alright, here's a starter. Here's the kit. Kit come with 2 new seals for there, a new bearing. It's got new bushings in it, new O-rings, and the brush plate. I got this kit from eBay. I just typed in the Polaris 400L starter rebuild kit. This came up, it was like, I don't know, 14 bucks. Not a bad deal. So let's tear this thing apart. Well, first let's clean it. We don't want any of that dirt in there. So let me clean this up, and then we'll get this thing tore apart. Okay, take this thing apart. This is simple. This is easy stuff. So just in good practice, before you take any starter apart, you want to make marks to line these 3 pieces back up. That'll make putting it back together a lot easier. This is 8mm, so we'll pull these 2 bolts out. See, it's wet in there. There's been water in this. Even though I tried my best to seal up that compartment, there's still water in this starter. A little mallet here, and just try to tap this apart. So there's people mowing, so please bear with any noise you hear in the background. Getting this starter apart, look at all the moisture in here. Moisture will find its way into this starter. So if you own one of these quads, be prepared for replacing starters. Now I know you can just buy a starter. You can get a cheap one, they're like 35 bucks. So if you don't want to rebuild any of this, just go buy a starter. Of course, I'm nickel and diamond, and if I didn't rebuild this, then I wouldn't have this video to show you guys. So let's continue here. So the magnet housing should just come apart here. Give it a few taps. Don't hit this with a hard hammer. use a soft rubber mallet or a dead blow. You will break the magnets in here, so just tap this thing lightly. It doesn't want to come apart for some reason. There we go. So luckily my gasket came off all in one piece, so I'll be able to reuse that. Now you can pull the rotor out of the starter. It's a strong magnet. Yeah, there's a bunch of water in this, just as I expected. Every time I take a starter out, it's got water in it, no matter what I do. I mean, you gotta wash it, right? Okay, so this is disassembled. This has got a bushing in it. I'm going to replace that bushing because the kit came with another one. And this end also has the brush plate and a bushing in there. So to get this brush plate out, we just got to take this other 10mm off. I would suggest saving all these parts because you never know. It may get you out of a pinch one day. So you got one small felt washer, two small felt washers, and then there's a big felt washer. Slide those off, and then the brush plate should come right out. Push that bolt through, and there's that out. I'm just going to leave this bracket installed on here. There's no reason to take it off. Get this cleaned out, and we'll work on getting that bushing out. Well, dang it, I did not hit record when I was taking that bushing out, but I did do it again, but the audio kind of sucks because the ultrasonic cleaner was running, so I don't know. Alright, now to get the other bushing out, I'm going to clamp it in the vise like so. Not real hard because this is just aluminum, but you want that flat down and just give it a little squeeze. And the same thing, I'm going to pack it with grease. Grab your punch. It needs to fit. It needs to fit tight in that bushing. It just comes right out. If you're having problems with your punch not sealing the grease in, lay a piece of paper towel across there and then drive it. Alright, I'm just going to drive the new bushing in. I'm going to use a brass drift here. Try to get that thing squared up in there best you can. I'm just using this big piece of square tube to give me a flat surface to set this part on. Getting it to go in straight is the trick. Try to get it as straight as you can. Okay, even further disassembly, we got an O-ring right here. We're going to change that out. And then the last little bit of disassembly here, we got to get this bearing off. So I'm going to use a 3-jaw puller because this thing is on there tight. Pull that bearing off like that. You got a little snap ring on the back side of that, but we don't have to take that off. Okay, the next thing I want to do is make sure the commutator is okay. I'm going to wipe it clean here with a rag. A lot of brush material kind of stuck in between there. Use a pick or whatever you want. I'm going to use a little bit of wet Scotch-Brite. Just kind of scrub this thing down. Now we're ready to finish the reassembly. I'm going to go ahead and put the bearing on. It's going to have to be pressed on. Alright, I just got a deep socket here, and it clears the spline shaft, and it only touches the inside bearing race. So I'm just going to stick that on there and I'm going to tap this bearing into place. Run it all the way down to that snap ring. Well, that's not the right O-ring. That's not even close. And this is a problem you run into when you buy cheap aftermarket. It's not even close. So this O-ring's actually still okay. It's not flattened out anywhere, it's not pinched, it's not dry, it's still nice and pliable. I would like to put a new one in, but I'm just going to replace it with the old one. Just do the best you can, tuck that thing down in that groove. Just going to take a little bit of grease, I'm going to put it in here where the bearing rides. Hopefully that'll keep things from rusting up too bad and maybe get this thing apart in the future if I ever need to. Alright, we got 2 seals here. We'll replace these with these. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and slip the rotor in through the magnets and be careful it don't snap out of your hands. And then find the mark and find the other mark. Where's my other mark? My other mark's gone. Now I can install the brush plate. You got to take all this off of here first. There's 1 nut, 2, there's the metal washer, and there's 3 of those fiber discs. This black plastic stays on the inside. I'm going to flip this thing inside like that and feed that through that hole. And you gotta line that square tab up with the casing there. There's an O-ring that's being a pain, so I'm going to take the O-ring off. Little O-ring. These 2 cutouts right here are to clear for the bolts. Make sure you line them up with these holes. O-ring on. Big felt, 2 little felts. Push them all the way down. There's a metal washer. And 1 nut. Make sure you're lined up in the back inside there with that plastic. And then tighten this guy down. This thing kind of sits on a little shoulder in there, like a little shelf. See how that tab slips into those slots there? That lines that up. Now, when you put this rotor in here, you got to go in at an angle kind of like this, and then you're going to kind of wiggle back and forth, and it'll push them brushes in to get that into place. I'm going to put a little bit of, just a little bit of grease on the rotor shaft where it goes into the bushing. Make sure you line your marks up. I'm just going to insert this in here, and I'm going to kind of push to the side and shove them brushes in until I get that seated into the bushing. And this is where you mark it, but unfortunately my mark went away up here when I cleaned this off. So the kit came with 2 new O-rings for these bolts. We'll go ahead and put those on. Got to line that little weird shaped washer up. Snug these guys down and the starter's done. Now it's always a good idea when you can to test your starter before you put it back on the machine and go through all that work. So I'm just going to jump this across this battery, and it should spark a little bit and then kick on and turn. So that's working just fine. Next thing you want to check is this is your starter bendix. This comes out with your starter. You want to make sure that this springs back like that, and that this only turns one way. It'll turn this way freely, but it won't turn back the other way. So as long as it's working in this manner, it should be good. Like this other one here, you see how it kind of gets stuck. It don't really want to come back. So that'll cause your starter to hang up. So make sure you replace that if you have any issues with this. Well, that's pretty much for it for the starter here. Hopefully it lasts a while. Good luck in there, little buddy. So get that thing put in, and it's just a reverse process of taking it apart. So not a bad job. Get this thing running again. All right. Well, that's it so far on this Polaris 400. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing, and don't be afraid to fix it. Thanks for watching.